Well, Zanny Wanny Woo, where have you been? It's good to see you again, uploading podcasts now and not then. What? But yes, ladies and gents, it's a simple episode. I've got no fancy introduction. But as this year wraps up, so does Spotify, and we got some progress to cover over. So get out your Spotify Wraps, get those comparison notes going. But first, let me tune it to the right station so we can get this podcast underway.
I am Rock Lee, and you're listening to the Zane Man.
Oh yes, Danhausen here, Danhausen. Listen to the Zane Man, or be cursed.
Tonight, I am Batman, and you're listening to the Zan Man.
Well, Mr. Zan Man.
So in the spirit of Spotify Rap, I've actually been going back and listening to a lot of my favorite musical artists from the past. And one of the bands in particular I listened to was Red. The band Red, the Christian metal rock band Red. And they have a song that has the exact same introduction. Here, tell me if this sounds familiar. It's the song Tell Me How to Say Goodbye off of their newer album, Rated R. Yeah, I guess we both found the same clip off of YouTube and used it for our masterpieces. Because on one end, you have a very good rock album with a very good song. I like that song. It was probably in my top 100 played in this year's Spotify Wrapped, which is convenient because we are recapping that here today on the masterpiece known as the Zandom Thoughts podcast. You thought I was just going to glaze over, but I completed the thought. I do that occasionally. But I digress. Spotify Wrapped is a time of the year that I almost always look forward to ever since its conception, which has been a couple of years now. I don't remember exactly when it started, but I know whenever it's like, which is kind of the most conceited thing ever. But ever since that first year it was released, I have that usual thing where I'm like, oh boy, I can't wait to see what I listen to all year. And even though it is interesting, and it's probably not as conceited as I'm making it out to be, it is something that I do look forward to, primarily because it's a good indicator of like how the year went, because I'm one of those people that listens to certain music based on my mood, and although, you know, regardless of the mood, there are certain genres, there are certain artists that do pop up. It's a good reflection on how my year went, and is kind of, rather than those, you know, YouTube rewinds where it's like, look at everything that happened this year. Mickey Mouse fell off the float at the parade. And then this YouTuber said a controversial thing online and got a hate for it. Oh, but we can't forget the guy who broke the record for most Lay's potato chips eaten. But rather than recapping the year in that sort of manner, you can recap it in a music perspective, which is kind of intimate in its own way. I'm probably over romanticizing it a little bit because it isn't that deep. And this year, ironically, when I looked at my Spotify Wrapped, I was the most unimpressed, if that makes sense, in spite of putting up some of the best numbers that I've put up in a couple of years now. So I've got mixed feelings towards Spotify Wrapped, but on that same note, it is a tradition for whatever podcast I'm recording at the time. This is attempt number 852. To recap my Spotify Wrapped. I may not go into as much detail as I used to, but I do kind of want to talk about it and open up the conversation for you guys to share your Spotify Wrapped. Let me give a brief indicator of kind of how Spotify Wrapped works, because there are a couple of things that I hate about it, and the more and more I proceed forward with my life and proceed forward with my year, there are big errors that pop up. Primarily the time frame in which the data is logged, because it's logged from January 1st of the year to November 15th, which means for me, someone who doesn't listen to Christmas music until after Thanksgiving, Christmas music just has no chance, even though right now I am playing quite a few Christmas albums on repeat, and I think at least 15, 20 songs would have made it on my Spotify Wrapped, because those are the songs that I've, repeated over and over again. So it is kind of janky, especially since December is a very emotional year. It's a very specific time frame for certain music, and it's not a very good, range to accurately log all of your listening data. In fact, Christmas time, in my opinion, is one of the most, musically inclined areas of the year, more so than the Julys. Like, obviously July is representative of summer, and so people are out back playing their Leonard Skinner. But Christmas time, you just hear music nonstop and everything. So I feel like it was a bit of a weird thing. I feel like Spotify Wrapped should be recapping it. It makes sense to do it in the new year, in my opinion. But hey, man, they're on a time crunch. They got other things to do. They're preparing for next year by jumping next year. I don't even know what I'm trying to say with this. But essentially, in order for a song to register as a play, you have to listen to it more than 30 seconds, and it'll count as a listen towards your song ranking. So there's a lot of songs that I got 30 seconds into, and I was like, I'm not feeling it, and I skipped it, and it still kind of clogged some of my play stats a little bit. So that's something to consider as well. Your top songs are calculated by play count rather than total time listened. So if you have that's probably why my wife's, her entire Spotify was pretty much the Bluey soundtrack. And realistically, all the songs are like a minute and a half, 2 minutes long. And so if she listens to these long choir music albums that have 7-minute songs and 8-minute songs that she's playing on repeat, those ones probably playtime beat out the Bluey songs, but the Bluey songs are just played so much for my daughter that they ended up beating out most of it. So that explains a lot. In your top 100 playlist, only the first 10 songs are sorted by play count. The rest are close, but sorted by artist. Actually, this year, it actually lists how many times you played each song. So I think that was a nice addition too. So that stat is actually not correct. This is the ruling for 2024. So some of these might be a little bit outdated. Your total time listening includes podcasts as well. Okay, so that makes sense. So in order to get your total time for music, I think you have to subtract the podcast time to get the accurate amount, unless it already calculates it. I looked at it very briefly on one of my breaks at work. So a lot of this is just going to be a very, very thorough review, if that makes sense. And also, your top artists are calculated by total play counts rather than total time listening. So that explains it, because I was talking about it with my wife, and I was like, I don't feel like all of my artists are the most accurate and everything. And a couple of my artists had their numbers amplified up at the beginning of the year, and then I stopped listening to them. But because I listened to them so much at the beginning of the year, it didn't count. I almost feel like an artist, and my top artist is this way, so it doesn't even matter. I'm kind of just complaining about nothing. I feel like if an artist pops up multiple times throughout the year, and even though it may not have as many plays as an artist that you listen to in January, because you were just absolutely all over that artist, it popped up in January, it popped up in February, it popped up in the middle of the year, it popped up at the end of the year, just nonstop popping up. I feel like that should count towards, how special that artist is in being in your top 5. Obviously, you would have to try and find a way to put that in the algorithm. So that's where it gets tricky. So that's probably why they do things the way they do. I feel like total time listened to should be an indicator, though, because there are 7-minute songs that I give my entire time to, where there's a song that I put on repeat that often gets put on a playlist and skipped after about 40 seconds in, because I couldn't get to it and skip it right away. And so that kind of projects the thing. First world problems at the end of the day, all of this, none of this really hardcore matters. But that is just a little bit of accounts of how all these things are generated and some things to consider when you're looking at your numbers overall. But I digress. Let me shut up. Let me open my Spotify Wrapped and let's see what Zanman's year looked like as far as music is concerned. In which the first stat is amongst everything I listen to, podcast, music. I don't think I listen to any audiobooks, but I'm pretty sure the audiobooks on Spotify, if you listen to them, also count towards your time. But out of everything, I listened to 37,381 minutes. That's 25 days. Nice. That's just what it says. This year is definitely more amplified than I listened to over the past couple of years. The past couple of years haven't been as impressive. In fact, it's like more closer to about half of that time over the past couple of years, like per year, closer to like 18,000 or 15,000, primarily because my new job allows me easier access to pop some headphones in and work. And that's why my numbers leading up to moving up to Wisconsin were pretty amplified. As I would go to work, put headphones in, work pretty much an 8-hour shift without taking them out, other than when I went on break and they had to charge and stuff like that. And then it definitely allowed me to listen to more music that way. But for the past couple of years, I've worked a more social job that I can only wear headphones for like a couple of hours because I was working the overnight and I worked in a residential area. And while everybody was asleep, I was doing my job. And so I'd pop some headphones in and go about my business. Whereas this year, I'm back in the warehouse setting and I'm in a place that allows me to pop headphones in, which is why I was allowed to pump those numbers up, boy. You probably didn't need to hear all that. I had at least probably 2 people click out who were like, I don't care about any of this. Just talk about the artists you listen to. Okay, I will. But first, I got my top 5 genres that I listen to, and that's not really a surprise. If you ever listened to the Zanman podcast when I was the host of that, it's pretty much what it was the past time, although one of them is pretty surprising. I'll start from the number 5 slot and work my way up to the first, and number 5 is video game music. I listen to a lot of video game soundtracks, primarily from fighting games, because I add them to my workout playlist, because they're just so pumping and awesome, and you can really get your reps in to the beats and stuff like that. And on top of that, I like listening to metal renditions of video game music from my childhood. One of my favorites is Donkey Kong Country. A lot of those music pieces from that soundtrack remade into a metal song. So yeah, that's why that's on there. 4 is jazz, which I imagine has to circulate more from a playlist I would play for my daughter while we were trying to get her to sleep. We need to kind of chill it out a little bit and get her to listen to. I don't know how it's number 4, primarily because I don't feel like I played it more than some other, genres that could be on here, but that's why that's on there. And then the top 3 are ones that I will always understand because those are my 3 most listened to genres. 3, Christian hip hop and rap. 2, Christian alternative rock, and number 1 is metalcore. No surprise on any of those 3 right there, and the order doesn't surprise me either. A big hit this year with the new update is and I don't know if it had it last year, I don't remember it being on here last year, was Spotify tells you your listening age. And my listening age is 31, which is pretty spot on because my actual age is 32. And I think that's because I've been listening to a lot of bands that were very popular when I was in high school. The Reds, the Pillars, even jumping into some System of a Down, even jumping into some, other bands around that time, listening to covers by Disturbed, listening to video game soundtracks from that era. The Call of Duty Zombies soundtrack was a big one that I've listened to. And so it makes sense that all of those ones were from me growing up, that it guessed my listening age and kind of compared it to my actual age. And as intriguing as this stat is, I don't really think it means anything. I know there's a bunch of people my age that are like, yes, I'm very classy. My listening age is 69. It's like, so your listening age is going to die soon. No, I'm just kidding. Good luck with that. It means you're outdated, son. But now we start getting to the part of Spotify rap that we actually care about. Our top bands, our top songs, our most replayed. And we're going to start with the top songs. And there is a very good theme on here that I'm sure you will notice. We'll start from number 5, which is Overdose by Memphis Mayfire off of their Shapeshifter album. Number 4 is Shapeshifter by Memphis Mayfire off of their Shapeshifter album. Number 3 is Stained Glass by the metal band Holy Name. That's actually a band I just discovered this year. I've been listening to a bunch of their music on repeat, so yeah, it doesn't surprise me that they're there. Number 2, I thought was going to be the number 1. It's Seven Horns, Seven Eyes, and Seven Seals by Ire. But the reason why this is on there is because I listened to it on repeat for sentimental reason and the fact that it's just a very good song. Even my daughter agrees to that. There's a video of her online somewhere of her dancing to the song during the breakdown at the end where it's like, "At Seven Seals," and she's just spinning around the room. Very cool. But the reason why this was such a big deal for me is it was the first song in a long time that Maddie Montgomery from For Today was featured on. And his screaming in it is fantastic. It brought me right back to those years, which is another reason probably why my listening age is what it is. It brought me back to listen to a ton of For Today, which will probably come into play later. Maybe. I don't know. It's been a while since I've seen those. And then my number 1 song is Necessary Evil by Memphis Mayfire off of their Shapeshifter album. Yes, that's right. Memphis Mayfire's Shapeshifter album. Probably my most listened to album of the year, which we'll get more into that in a second. Let's go ahead and shoot forward to the top 5 albums itself. And again, we will start from the number 5 and work our way up. And number 5 was Demon Hunter's brand new album, There Was a Light Here, which is very, very emotional because it has to deal with the death of Ryan, the lead singer's mother, and you can feel it in every single song. There's a bunch of songs with thumping and bass, and it feels like what a lot of people have been calling a return to form. I would argue that Demon Hunter never left their form. They've always been very good. They've explored different genres of the metal and the rock scene and everything like that, but they've always consistently been heavy. They've always consistently had meaningful lyrics, and they've always consistently been good. But I will say There Was a Light Here is probably my favorite album they've dropped in a very long time. And I'm trying to think of the last one I would compare it to, like as far as how much I enjoyed it. And honestly, Outlive, that came out in 2017, is probably the album I would compare it to because I really enjoyed that album. Outlive might actually be my favorite Demon Hunter album. I have a nostalgia for some of their earlier ones, but Outlive is probably the one I consistently go back to. But yes, I very much enjoyed There Was a Light Here by Demon Hunter, and we'll be exploring it even more. As I said, Ire's song featuring Maddie Montgomery caused me to go back to For Today, and so both 4 and 3 are For Today albums. 4 was Breaker, and 3 was Fight the Silence. I think those are easily their 2 best albums. For Today just has such meaningful lyrics, man, and so even if you just want to bop to it and bop your head at some nasty chunks of guitar just flinging into your eardrums like pieces of fat off of a undercooked hamburger. What are you even talking about at this point? But no, bopping to their beats, listening to the meaningful lyrics, and dare I even say it, shedding a tear or two. But alas, the second and the first album are both from the same band. Memphis Mayfire's Remade in Misery comes in at number 2, and number 1 is Shapeshifter. Remade in Misery is an interesting album because I keep exploring it, but it was primarily on there because although I would not call Remade in Misery their best album, there's it's like half the album, like 5 or 6 songs on that have not been taken off a bunch of my playlists because those songs are so great. And it's ironic because Shapeshifter, when I first heard the album all the way through, it was one where I was like, ooh, not their best work. I don't like it. And there was like 2 or 3 songs that I would enjoy. Shapeshifter, the title album, was one of them. Infection was another one. And there was one other song that I would listen to. But the more and more I listened to it all the way through, the more that album really spoke to me and really hit a nerve. And it's one of those ones where after about the 4th or 5th listen to all the way on the album, that's when it finally started to hit. That's why I do want to do music reviews on either this podcast or another podcast I'm working on at some point. But the reviews themselves likely will not come out until a month or maybe even 2 after the album itself comes out, because I have to listen to it. My relationship grows. Sometimes I listen to an album and it's the best thing ever. And then about a month in, I was like, ooh, I overhyped that. I didn't really care for those songs, and a lot of them are actually really basic. And then on the flip side of things, I listened to it and I'm like, ooh, they went in a different direction. And because it wasn't what I was expecting, that's no bueno. That's no bueno. I don't like that album. And then I listened to it a couple more times and I'm like, I see what they were doing there. And then I listened to it and I'm like, oh God, they made this album for me. And I'm just crying, tears, and my basement's flooded. But no, that is the exact way I feel about Memphis Mayfires. I think the Shapeshifter album actually made me go back to Remade for Misery, and I was like, see, this is what real Memphis Mayfire is. And then I kept going back and forth, and I was like, Memphis Mayfire was there all along. They're always here with me, hugging me. And yeah, Memphis Mayfire made out like a bandit. And I'm pretty sure this breakdown could show you who's going to end up in my top 5 artists. But first, we're going to swing by podcasts, in which 19,664 minutes of podcasts were consumed by me this year, in which we had a top 5. Number 5 was The Good Guy, Bad Guy, which is Chael Sonnen and Daniel Cormier on their podcast that on ESPN, where they talk mixed martial arts. That's really all it is. I love Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen's my favorite MMA fighter, probably not to watch, but to listen to. He's very entertaining, very WWE inspired and almost promo inspired, but here you actually get his genuine nice guy reaction. And him and Daniel Cormier are fantastic. They have great chemistry, and just hearing them talk about MMA is one of the best things ever. 4 would probably be number 1 if we took the stats from Apple Podcasts, because I subscribe to their extra episodes. Some podcasts have it to where you can buy a subscription service on a separate website, and that will unlock other episodes on other platforms. Spotify, unfortunately, did not allow that for the Jocko podcast, so I had to listen to it through Apple Podcasts. So the fact that it made number 4, I maybe stopped listening to it on Spotify in July, and I've just kept listening. So yeah, it would easily be number 1. His episodes are like 3 hours long, and then all the extra episodes, which he releases like 4 times a month, are an extra hour on top of each other. So that would have inflated the stats. It would have easily been number 1. Number 3 is First Take, an ESPN show where controversial figure Stephen A. Smith opens up topics and they all just kind of debate it. I love sports, so that's why that's on there. 2 is Creepcast. It's pretty much what you hear me guys, a variation of what you guys hear me do on the podcast sometimes. They go through and they pick creepypastas off the internet, which is like urban legends. Slender Man is a prime example. Mothman could be one, which we had an episode on. And there's stories written about these figures on the internet that they'll read through and judge, react to, make voices for. It's just a big, huge spectacle affair. It's a very entertaining show, which is why it's at number 2, and they typically release like 2 or 3 hour episodes a week. But the number 1 is Nats Chat. It is the Nationals baseball podcast in which they literally release an episode after every single game they play. That means there's been over 162 episodes this year alone, and I listened to them all. That's why it's number 1. So maybe Jolly Cub Podcast wouldn't be number 1, but it would definitely be close. because I listened to a lot of baseball podcasts this year. But those are my top 5 podcasts. Let me know if I made it onto yours, even though I only released like 5 episodes, because I somehow made it on my wife's, because like I said in a previous episode, my daughter loves the podcast and she loves listening to it to help her sleep sometimes. Not so much anymore, but she did it in the middle of the year. And that was a very big claim to fame for me. So let me know if I made it on your top 5. And finally, the big gaboozle, my top 5 artists. And we'll start with number 5, which is the Christian metal band Red. Yes, at the beginning of the year, I went through and listened to their entire discography. In the middle of the year, dude, I freaking had Until We Have Faces, which is their original album, on repeat. And then at the beginning of the year, when I listened through their entire discography, I put a bunch of their songs in playlists. And so they've just constantly been there. Like I said, I feel like Red could possibly be above a couple of these other bands because they've been consistently throughout my year. But since it goes based off the stats, I would have been surprised if they hadn't been in the top 5. But there are 4 other artists who edged them out as far as stats go. And number 4 is Lecrae. He had a new album come out this year, Reconstruction, and on the road to that new album coming out, which is very good. I like it personally. I went through and listened to his entire discography multiple times. So he's on number 4. Number 3 is probably the biggest surprise on here, but at the same time, it's not, because I've been revisiting them hardcore because I've been listening to the lead singer's podcast. I am, of course, talking about Skillet. John Cooper released a podcast, and he's got a very interesting walk with God, and I appreciate listening to his perspective on things, hearing him stand up for the truth when a lot of other Christian artists don't. And so because of that, I chose to go and support his discography and re-listen to a lot of the albums that I will admit are kind of in that same vein as that Memphis Mayfire album I just talked about. A couple of their albums over the past couple of years, I'm like, ooh, Skillet lost it. At least I'll always have Collide. And then over the past year or so, I went through and re-listened to those albums and found songs that I really liked. They have their new Christmas song that just came out that Christians are calling demonic, which I guess most Christians don't realize what demonic actually means. Apparently, if you yell, that means it's demonic. But if by that nature, that means like 75-80% of preachers are demonic because they yell. So I don't know. But that's not the point of this. Skillet. It's been a very good year for Skillet. So, yeah. Not surprised that they made it on, but surprised that they made it above Red, because I feel like I listened to Red more, but like I said, I'm not even going to try and guess that. Spotify knows more than us. AI is taking over. But you know who's not taking over? Number 2, which is For Today. Like I said, I listened to a lot of Maddie Montgomery this year. He releases episodes from his church on Spotify via a podcasting platform. And so that, hearing him, it reminded me of the great messages behind his messages, behind the lyrics of his songs. And then on top of that, the IRA album. It was just a Maddie Montgomery type of year. And I listened to, when I first started working at this job I'm currently working at, for literal months, I just had For Today albums on repeat. But number 1, as you would have expected with all the other stats, who's been top 1 on every other song, album, whatever you want to call it, it is Memphis Mayfire. And as I've already talked about, it is no surprise to me. And so that is my Spotify Wrapped. Like I said, if you want to share your Spotify Wrapped with me, do it in the comments. I've been posting about it on my Facebook, which Rocky has shared his with me. And it doesn't matter what's affecting it. If you fell asleep with your music on and that inflated the stats, that's perfectly fine with me. I would love to see what your guys' musical years looked like. Primarily because 2025 for me has been a very rough year, and I think that also can be reflected in the music that I'm listening to. Red is very often, even though there is a positive message because a lot of their songs often point back to Jesus, a lot of Red's albums also are about struggle and the constant struggle with yourself, with the adversary, with other people you might come in contact with. The album in particular, Until We Have Faces, is about like, what's going on? What the heck am I doing? And feeling betrayal. And with the events that happened here in 2025, that's the kind of music I've kind of been leaning towards, which is, it might be a little over dramatic. Maybe I'm in my high school emo phase again. But that's probably why Memphis Mayfire is number one, because like I said, their newest album really hit a chord, and it seemed to be the soundtrack for what me and my wife are going through here in 2025, which is a very beautiful a very beautiful year in many ways. But on that same note, it's kind of been I don't want to say a garbage or trash year, because I believe it's going to be used to grow us in an amazing way, but that growth has been very painful, and I think that's reflective of the music I'm going through. Lecrae's newest album, for example, is one of him going through pain and being scrutinized and all sorts of other things as well. The reconstruction, rebuilding some things, and that just seems to be a theme in mine and my wife's life. We're trying to figure out where we're at. We're trying to take apart some things in our life, and rebuild from there, but at the same time follow God's direction and make sure that we're following his word, which is what I believe all these bands have a very good, way of expressing that they're doing. And so I say all of that to re-emphasize that music and the history for the year of Unwrapped has a very good way of telling the story of how your year went. And I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful to be able to go over this episode and upload it for you guys, and hopefully you guys enjoy it the way I enjoyed making it. But I digress. That's not going to be the end of the episode quite yet. There is one more thing I'd like to cover, and it's kind of the dynamic of what Zandom Thoughts is going to be going forward. I know I had a clear idea of what I wanted to express and how I wanted to build the podcast. And I think the way I'm trying to build the podcast is not convenient for me and not as enjoyable for me. To an extent, I mean. Like, of course, I love talking about the Mothman. Of course, I like talking about bluey conspiracy theories and creating episodes that my kids can look back on and have their favorite shows ruined. Like, the things I'm talking about are enjoyable, but it limits me so much, especially as I'm trying to build here in the beginning. And granted, talking about some topics might scare away viewers early on. If I just randomly release a sports controversies episode, a lot of people are going to be like, well, I don't freaking care about sports. I came here for the conspiracies. But as we find our footing, it's, I don't know. I don't really know what I'm trying to create with Zandom Thoughts. And isn't that the idea behind the name in general? This podcast is literally just random, and it'll come to build a structure on its own. As you can tell by the artwork, it's absolute chaos. I may look calm on the surface, but on the inside, I have an ADHD brain that's shooting me in 852 directions, which, as I said in episode 1, makes me an absolute terrible podcasting host. And the data from my episodes is very telling, but I don't want to completely rely on the data. I kind of still am in the phase where I want to throw hundreds of darts at the board and see what sticks. And maybe one day we'll have a niche. Maybe one day we will find our footing. Maybe one day Zandom Thoughts won't be so Zandom. But as of right now, I want it to be a little bit more random. I want you to be able to look at it and think, what kind of episode is he going to give this week? Like, as goofy as it sounds, I had the feeling earlier this week where I didn't want to listen to all the usual podcasts I listen to because they were too predictable. Like, yes, they're going to have good conversations. Jocko's going to have good conversations about taking responsibility, personal growth, and former military stuff. Joe Rogan's going to have great talks about comedians and scientific talks about aliens and stuff like that. And even though he's probably the most random out of all the podcasts I do listen to, you kind of know by this point what you're going to get out of the Joe Rogan experience. But there was a video game podcast I listened to recently that just randomly came out with an episode where they ranked their top 10 favorite zombie movies. And I was like, why don't more podcasts do this? Why don't more podcasts just travel outside the norm and release an episode that's just like out of left field? Because I really enjoyed that. Much more so than I enjoyed their video game content, and I really enjoyed their video game content. And so that's kind of where I'm at, where I'm like, that's what the Zandman podcast was, and that's what Zandom Thoughts probably should be, is a little bit more of the Zandom. For a while there, I just felt like I was planning out these episodes when the play on words is supposed to be, these are my random thoughts from Zan. They're not so random. I'm planning out every single episode, which to a certain extent is great because that's how you create a good product. It's well thought out. It's well edited. It's put together with love, care, and you're pushing out the best possible product. But it's not sticking up to the niche so far. It's not random at all. It's just me planning nonstop and trying to throw these planned out episodes in the midst of having 3 kids. And it's kind of crazy. And I wanted to put a little bit more random in it. I want it to be where there's some episodes where Aaron Rodgers goes on one of his crazy mushroom rants to the media, and I go, all right, let's see what Aaron Rodgers is doing, and I play a sound clip and react to it, play a sound clip and react to it, that sort of thing. I want it to be more random and have those random pieces eventually build the niche that I get. Even though everybody in the world is going to hear this and be like, well, since you don't have a pre-put together audience, you're going to fail. Well, I can't bank just strictly on that. And maybe one day I will find that niche. Maybe through these random pieces, I'll build my paper mache castle and it'll be my paper mache castle that's super beautiful. But my point in saying all of this is, guys, we're going to return to our roots to an extent, and we are going to be a little bit more Zandom. Granted, we are still going to have our planned out episodes, but if I ever come in and I have one episode where I just want to throw something together that's not what this podcast originally was built to be, then I'll be okay with that too. And based on the data that you guys present to me on my listening, maybe this podcast will morph. Who knows? Maybe this podcast will turn into a sports podcast. It just won't be about conspiracies and aliens and stuff. Maybe we'll be talking about David Eckstein winning the World Series for the Cardinals like back in 2011, 2010. I don't know. See, that was pretty Zandom, wasn't it? But yeah, I am going to start trying to upload on a regular basis again, which means I should probably come up with an upload schedule. But for now, I don't think I'm going to commit to like uploading weekly or bi-weekly or anything like that, because I'm at a portion in life where I have a very filled schedule. But this is something I want to get back into the regular of doing. I think the goal I'm going to set for myself is twice a month at least, and I'm going to kind of just upload them as I finish them. If I did have a set schedule, I would probably, work at uploading them on Tuesday or Thursday. But I'm not even gonna commit to that. I'm gonna get back to enjoying the podcast, and how I'm gonna do that is playing to my strengths and my schedule and not adding another I have to do this to that schedule. So thanks guys for being patient with that regard, and I can't wait to get back into the thick of it. Anyway, guys, if you listen to this point in the podcast, you are a fantastic human being, and I appreciate your support. Even if you've never commented, even if you aren't subscribed, even if you never said a single word to me ever before. If you listen to this point in the podcast, I appreciate the living daylights out of you, and thank you for taking time to listen to some bald dude talk on a podcast. And maybe, if you've made it to this point, you could hit that subscribe button and join our crazy Zandom family. Blah, blah. But I'm not going to leave you on that craziness. I'm going to leave you with this from a clip from Jocko that really has me thinking about being grateful for things. I'm at a point in life where it feels like life is just handing us breadcrumbs. And Jocko responded to somebody's message that pretty much said, be thankful for the breadcrumbs. And so hopefully you guys get something out of it, because I know I certainly did. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Yeah, that's a rough lesson to learn. It's a rough lesson to learn, but luckily you got away with it pretty cheap. And look, and I know I'm not saying it's not hard to lose your job, especially your dream job. I'm not saying it's not going to be hard to start over, because it certainly is. But a little bit of assumption here. You're young, you're healthy, and having those two things, like, you have all kinds of runway to go and make things happen. And it seems the most important thing here is it seems like you have the humility to recognize where you dropped the ball. You dropped the ball, and you know that, and you recognize that, and you're not going to forget that. And I would recommend you don't forget that, and I don't think that you will, but that is what will prevent you, because you're worried about making the same mistake again. That's what will prevent you from making the same mistake. When you wake up every day and you remind yourself to be humble and to be grateful for what you have, regardless of what you have. Be grateful for what you have, because it's a blessing. You have a roof that's not leaking, blessing. You have some food to eat in the cupboard, blessing. You have the ability to go out and work, even if it's just crumbs. Even what you have right now, gathering up crumbs on the job market, at least there's some crumbs. And you have the ability to gather them up. Some people don't have that. You learned a lesson. It's a lesson you're never going to forget. You're going to have a kick-ass story from this, by the way, at some point. Because you're a journalist, you're a reporter. So you're a writer. You got some good stuff to write about, by the way. Man, can't really buy that. Can't really buy that. You're asking what I would do in this situation. You probably already know what I would do. I would redeem myself. I would redeem myself by working harder than I've ever worked before. I would show up earlier. I would go home later. I would volunteer for the jobs and tasks that no one else wants to do. I would eat crow, and I would enjoy the sweet taste of humble pie. And eventually, people would begin to notice. They'd see that I was reliable. They'd see that I showed up early. They'd see that I went home late. They'd see that I worked harder than everyone else. And at some point, someone would give me a little small opportunity. And when that happened, I would own it, and I would take that opportunity, and I would take it to the utmost. And they would notice that as well. And then they'd give me a little bigger opportunity, and I'd own that, and I'd crush that, and more opportunities would come. And I'd stay humble, and I'd build, and I'd grow, and I'd work hard. And I would not only get back to where I was, I would overtake that former position, and I would usurp it, and I would put myself into a place that I couldn't have even dreamed of before. And I would go back, and I would thank the boss that fired me. And I'd say, hey, you remember 18 years ago when I was living the high life, and you fired me? I appreciate it, because now I own this company over here that I built, and it never would have happened if it wasn't for you.